The jungle is nature's most unforgiving arena, a world where beauty and brutality coexist in perfect balance. Beneath its emerald canopy, danger lurks in every shadow. For those who venture too deep, the jungle's mystery often becomes a nightmare and sometimes a tomb. These are the stories of 5 people who met the most brutal and terrifying deaths deep within the wild, where civilization fades and survival becomes a desperate, losing battle against nature itself. It began as one man's obsession and ended as one of the most haunting disappearances in exploration history. Percy Fawcett was not just an adventurer. He was a man possessed by mystery. Fawcett believed that deep in the heart of the Amazon lay a lost city he called Zeed. In May 1925, Fawcett set out on what he called his final and greatest expedition. With him were his 21-year-old son Jack and Jack's close friend Raleigh Rimmel. The 3 men disappeared into the Mato Grosso region of Brazil, a place so vast and hostile that few who enter ever return. They carried little beyond their essentials: some canned food, milk powder, guns, flares, and a chronometer. Fawcett believed that traveling light and showing respect to the indigenous tribes would keep them safe, but the deeper they went, the more the forest seemed to turn against them. Fawcett was already a legend before his final journey. Born in 1867 to an English family of explorers and scholars, he was a cartographer, archaeologist, soldier, and dreamer all in one. He had charted unexplored territories for the Royal Geographical Society, served in the British Army, and became friends with the writers like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who used Fawcett's adventures as inspiration for the lost world. To those who knew him, he was brilliant, daring, and more than a little eccentric. He claimed to have seen enormous snakes, giant spiders, and creatures that science refused to believe existed. But the one thing he truly couldn't let go of was the idea that something was still hidden deep within the Amazon. After years of expeditions and research, he became convinced that the ruins of a forgotten civilization lay beyond the rivers and forests of Mato Grosso. He called it Z. Some thought it was madness, but Fawcett's obsession only grew stronger. He once said he would find Z or die trying, and in the end, those words came true. On April 20th, 1925, Fawcett's small party left the Brazilian city of Cuiabá. They traveled by mule and canoe, disappearing deeper into territory that even maps could not describe. The last letter Percy sent to his wife, Nina, was full of optimism. He wrote that he and the boys were in good health and ready to push into unexplored lands. That was the last anyone ever heard from him. The letter came from a place called Dead Horse Camp, a name that would soon take on chilling meaning. Weeks passed, then months, then years. No sign of Fawcett or his companions ever surfaced. The Royal Geographical Society officially declared them lost in 1927, but the world refused to let the story die. Dozens of expeditions tried to find him. Some came back empty-handed. Others never came back at all. Stories began to circulate. Some said he had been killed by hostile tribes. Others believed disease or starvation claimed him. A few even whispered that Fawcett had found his lost city and chosen to stay there, abandoning the modern world entirely. The jungle, thick with life and silence, kept its secret well. Years later, rumors emerged from the Kalapalo tribe, one of the last known groups to have seen Fawcett alive. A chief claimed that the explorers had angered local tribes by refusing to offer gifts or attempting to take guides without permission, a fatal mistake in the Amazon. Some said the tribe killed them. Others insisted they simply vanished, swallowed whole by the forest after illness and exhaustion took their toll. Bones were found, compasses unearthed, even a nameplate, but none ever proved to belong to Fawcett. Every clue only deepened the mystery. The most haunting detail came from Fawcett himself. Before leaving, he had warned that no one should come looking for him if he disappeared. "The danger is too great," he wrote. It was as if he knew the jungle would not let him go, and he didn't want others to share his fate. It was supposed to be his life's greatest mission, but it ended in silence on a forbidden island. John Allen Chau was only 26 when he set out to do what no outsider had survived before: step foot on North Sentinel Island. Hidden deep in the Andaman Sea, the island is home to the Sentinelese, one of the last uncontacted tribes on Earth, known for meeting outsiders not with words, but with arrows. Yet in November 2018, Chow, a young American missionary, believed he'd been chosen by God to bring them the gospel. Born in Alabama and raised in Washington State, Chow grew up with a deep Christian faith and a fascination for adventure. Friends remembered him as warm, fearless, and idealistic, a man who saw purpose where others saw danger. During college at Oral Roberts University, he dreamed of serving as a missionary in places untouched by modern life. To Chow, the Sentinelese weren't just isolated people, they were souls in need of saving. He called North Sentinel Satan's last stronghold on Earth. Despite Indian laws banning contact with the tribe whose isolation makes them vulnerable to disease, Chow began planning his mission in 2018. He trained at a missionary boot camp that simulated encounters with hostile tribes, learned first aid, and studied quarantine methods. He even packed gifts, scissors, safety pins, fish, and a waterproof Bible. In his journal, he wrote, "Please do not be angry at them or at God if I get killed. Don't retrieve my body." That November, Chow bribed 2 fishermen to take him near the restricted island. From his small canoe, he paddled toward the jungle shore. As he approached, islanders emerged with bows and arrows. Chow called out in English, waved, and sang hymns, but one arrow struck the Bible he held to his chest. He retreated, shaken but determined. That night he wrote, "God, I don't want to die, but if this is your will, let your kingdom come." At dawn, on November 17, 2018, Chow made his final attempt. The fishermen watched from afar as he disappeared into the trees. Hours later, they saw the islanders dragging his body along the beach. It was the end of his mission and his life. His diary, later recovered, revealed a haunting mix of fear and conviction. "This is not pointless. This is love." News of his death spread worldwide. Some called him a martyr of faith. Others saw him as reckless and naive. Anthropologists warned that his actions risked the tribe's survival. Even his father blamed the missionary community for killing his son with their extreme vision. Indian officials abandoned recovery efforts after facing resistance from the tribe. The government declared North Sentinel Island and Chow's remains off-limits forever. It happened in one of the most dangerous jungles on Earth, the kind of place where the air feels heavy, the rivers move like living things, and every shadow hides something ancient. Hendrik Coetzee, a fearless South African explorer and world-class kayaker, had made it his life's mission to go where others wouldn't dare. But on December 7, 2010, deep in the heart of the Congo, that mission came to a sudden, horrifying end. Coetzee wasn't just another thrill-seeker chasing adrenaline. Born in 1975, he'd spent years mastering Africa's wildest rivers, blending courage with compassion. He'd once paddled the entire Nile River from its source to the sea, not for fame, but to draw attention to the humanitarian crises unfolding along its banks. Friends described him as both calm and fearless, a man who could face chaos and still find beauty in it. By 2010, Hendry was leading another first-of-its-kind journey, a kayaking expedition tracing the path from the White Nile into the Congo Basin. It was a route no one had ever completed, threading through some of the most isolated and unpredictable waters on the planet. He was joined by 2 American adventurers and experienced kayakers documenting unexplored whitewater and the impact of development in the region. Together, they pushed through torrential rapids, malaria-heavy jungles, and stretches of river so remote that even maps struggled to describe them. Then came that fateful day on the Lukuga River, a narrow, churning ribbon of brown water twisting through the Congolese jungle. Team was paddling quietly, the sounds of insects and distant thunder filling the air. The river looked calm, deceptively calm. In a split second, the surface erupted. A massive crocodile lunged from beneath the water and latched onto Hendry's kayak, pulling him under before anyone could react. There was no struggle, no scream, just the sound of the river closing over him. His companions sat frozen in their boats, paralyzed by disbelief. In the seconds it took for the ripples to fade, Hendrik Coetzee, a man who had survived some of Africa's fiercest terrains, was gone. The river that had carried him for thousands of miles had finally claimed him. News of his death rippled through the global adventure community. This wasn't an amateur swallowed by nature, it was one of the best. Coetzee had spent a lifetime studying the dangers of Africa's waterways, yet even his experience couldn't save him from a creature that ruled those waters long before humans ever arrived. His death was a brutal reminder that in the jungle there is no such thing as mastery. Nature does not care about skill, courage, or fame. The crocodile attack wasn't just a tragedy, it was a glimpse of how quickly the wild can turn from breathtaking to merciless. A memorial service was held in January 2011, where friends and fellow explorers spoke not just of his death, but of his life, his humility, his humor, his unshakable calm in the face of danger. His story was later immortalized in the documentary Kadoma, and in National Geographic's Edge of the Unknown with Jimmy Chin, where those who knew him tried to make sense of his final moments. But perhaps the truth is simpler and far more haunting. Hendrik Coetzee died doing what he loved in a place that reflected everything he believed about life. That real adventure lies beyond control, beyond comfort, and sometimes beyond survival itself. In the mist-draped jungles of Rwanda, where the air is thick with the breath of ancient mountains, a woman once walked among giants. Dian Fossey wasn't just a scientist, she was a guardian, a fierce protector of the mountain gorillas she called her family. For 2 decades, she lived in isolation in the Virunga Mountains, studying, defending, and loving the creatures most of the world had forgotten. Locals whispered her name with both reverence and fear, Nyiramachibiri, the woman who lived alone on the mountain. But her devotion came at a deadly cost. On the morning of December 27, 1985, the jungle that had once embraced her became her grave. Fossey was found brutally murdered inside her cabin at the Karasoke Research Center. Her face was mutilated, her belongings tossed about, yet her valuables, cash, passport, and guns lay untouched. This was not a robbery. It was a message. Dian had spent years battling poachers who butchered gorillas for trophies, often confronting them face to face. She was fearless, sometimes ruthless, and her war against those who profited from death made her enemies on every side. Officials resented her defiance, poachers feared her wrath, and even conservation organizations found her too radical, too uncontrollable. When her favorite gorilla, Digit, was speared to death and his hands cut off for ashtrays, something inside her broke. From that day, she vowed vengeance. She led patrols through the foggy mountains, tearing down snares and torching poachers' camps. To protect her gorillas, she waged psychological warfare dressing in masks, spreading rumors of curses, and using black magic rituals to terrify intruders. The more she fought, the more isolated she became, her cabin turning into both sanctuary and fortress. So, when she was found dead, bludgeoned in her sleep, the wall behind her, hacked open by machete suspicion, fell everywhere. Her American assistant, Wayne McGuire, was accused by Rwandan authorities and sentenced to death in absentia. Others believed it was revenge from poachers, or even a hit ordered by corrupt officials threatened by her work. The truth was swallowed by the jungle that day, just as it had swallowed so many of the gorillas she tried to save. Fossey's diary, found beside her bed, carried her final words, a chilling reflection of her life's purpose. When you realize the value of all life, you dwell less on what is past and concentrate more on the preservation of the future. They buried her beside Digit, her loyal companion, in the gorilla graveyard she had built with her own hands. Her cabin still stands in silence, half consumed by vines, as though the forest itself is reclaiming her story. Some who visit Karasoke say the jungle feels alive there, watchful, protective, almost grieving. Dian Fossey's death remains one of the most haunting mysteries in wildlife history, a brutal reminder that even those who dedicate their lives to nature's defense can become its most tragic victims. It was Easter Sunday, March 26, 1967, the day the jungle swallowed a man whole. Jim Thompson, the American Silk King, who transformed Thailand's silk industry into an international empire, left his holiday bungalow in Malaysia's misty Cameron Highlands for an afternoon walk and never returned. He wasn't a reckless adventurer or a wandering tourist. He was a wealthy, well-connected businessman with ties to intelligence agencies, royalty, and art circles across Asia. Yet somehow, in broad daylight, on a simple jungle trail just outside a tea-growing town, Jim Thompson vanished without a sound, without a trace, and without a single clue that made sense. That morning had started peacefully. Thompson was staying at the Moonlight Bungalow with friends Helen and Ling Tian-gi and his longtime companion, Constance Mangskau. They'd spent the morning attending Easter service at a small mountain church before returning for lunch. Around 1:30 p.m., Jim told the others he was going for a short walk. Nothing unusual, just a stroll down Jalan Kemunting, the quiet road that wound past colonial cottages and into the jungle beyond. He waved goodbye, stepped into the sunlight, and disappeared into history. Hours passed. By late afternoon, his friends grew uneasy. He was an experienced traveler, but this was no ordinary forest. The Cameron Highlands were dense, unpredictable, and known to turn disoriented hikers around in minutes. When sunset came and there was still no sign of him, panic took hold. What began as a polite search by friends quickly turned into one of the largest manhunts in Malaysian history. For 11 days, more than 500 people, police, soldiers, Orang Asli trackers, British soldiers on leave, missionaries, mystics, and even curious tourists scoured the forest. Helicopters hovered over canopies. Bloodhounds sniffed through mud and moss. Searchers combed rivers, ravines, and abandoned huts. Yet not a single footprint, torn piece of clothing, or body was ever found. Jim Thompson had simply ceased to exist. Theories multiplied like vines. Some believed he had fallen into a ravine or been mauled by a wild animal. Others whispered darker possibilities: murder, abduction, espionage. After all, Thompson wasn't just a silk merchant. Before he built his textile empire, he'd worked for the OSS, the wartime intelligence agency that would later become the CIA. Could he have been lured into the jungle for a meeting that went wrong? Or did he stage his own disappearance, slipping away under a new identity as Cold War tensions spread across Southeast Asia? There were no answers, only contradictions. Bloodhounds couldn't find his scent beyond the bungalow's gate, as if he had been picked up by car. Witnesses claimed they'd seen a tall foreigner walking near Brinchang that afternoon, but their accounts conflicted and faded with time. Years later, in 1985, villagers discovered bone fragments buried near a vegetable plot in the same region. Were they his? Authorities collected them but never confirmed a match. Even DNA testing decades later offered no closure. The bones vanished from police storage before any definitive analysis could be done. Adding to the mystery was a chilling twist. Just months after Jim's disappearance, his sister was brutally murdered in Pennsylvania. Her killer was never caught. Was it coincidence or part of something much larger? Investigators could never prove a connection, but the timing left an unsettling shadow over both cases. Decades later, researchers revisited the search records. They discovered that despite the massive scale of the operation, only about 30-40% of the target area had been thoroughly covered, meaning his body, if it had been there, could have easily been missed. The jungle, dense and unforgiving, could erase all traces of a man within days. Predators, rain, and rot would do the rest. Still, others refused to believe he died there. Some claimed he had been spotted months later in Tahiti, in Hong Kong, even in Europe. None of the sightings were confirmed. What makes Jim Thompson's story so haunting isn't just that he vanished, it's how impossible that vanishing seems. He was a man surrounded by influence, wealth, and intelligence connections, and yet not one of those things could save him. No ransom, no message, no body, just silence and jungle. Today, the Moonlight Bungalow still stands, renamed Jim Thompson Cottage. Tourists visit it like a shrine, walking the same road where he took his final steps. The jungle looms around it, unchanged and indifferent. Locals still whisper that on misty afternoons, a figure in a white shirt can sometimes be seen walking alone down Kemunting Road, vanishing just before the turn. Whether Jim Thompson was murdered, escaped, or became another victim of the wilderness, no one can say for sure. but his disappearance remains one of Southeast Asia's greatest unsolved mysteries. A story that reminds us how easily even the most powerful can be devoured by the unknown.